evening, everybody. Welcome to Let's Talk Assassin's Creed, your number one podcast for all things Assassin's Creed. Tonight is a unique episode because we don't have a game to play. Sadly, I really want it because we're doing a prequel deep dive to Valhalla, which comes out on November 17th. If you haven't pre-ordered it, go pre-order. It looks epic, but that's my opinion. So tonight, we're going to go over from what we've seen from YouTubers' deep dives, their personal demos, what Darby's talked about, what Ash has talked about. And then near the end, before we do our final impressions on the game so far, we have some comments to read over. So, anybody like Vikings?
Yeah, I mean, what's not to love? It's always been a particularly kind of interesting, I think, period of time, really, because I think just from stuff I've read, and I think it was on a Ubisoft blog, I think the Vikings themselves kind of left behind very few kind of historical texts and things about themselves, which is why there's long been a kind of negative perception of Vikings. But I think the game's going to explore the side that we don't really get to see, which I'm really looking forward to.
Well, as a friend of mine from AC Landmarks has said numerous times, history is known to be written by the victors. I think AC Landmarks said that. I'm truly sorry if I butchered that quote, but as you've just said, we have this negative impact of pillaging and destroying because the people that fought against them and won painted them in a negative light, and hopefully Ubisoft can rewrite the history cultural, because they are very cultural beings, and the combat looks brilliant.
Yeah, you're not wrong there. I think it's one thing we all know that the Vikings are famous for is the combat and these big Viking raiding parties and things like that. But yeah, like you alluded to there, it's obviously quite clear that despite the stories of Vikings just being a band of pillagers, that there is obviously deep culture within this group of people, and whether it's religion or different rituals or their beliefs and things like that. And I think it'll be great to kind of go look into that a bit more in that side of the game.
I'm particularly looking forward to the approach to combat and exploration, because as the games have grown, we always know that combat fits in with the time. Assassin's Creed Unity, which had a lot of fencing influence, set in the French Revolution. We know France is famous for its fencing. Odyssey had that deep mercenary style, brutal fighting combat. So from what we do see, the deep dives, we do get a lot of aggressive, hands-on combat. But is it going to feel meaty and weighty, or is it going to feel like Odyssey at times, as people have called it, floaty? But I really don't understand that reference. But I do say Odyssey's combat does feel light when it should feel meaty and heavy.
Yeah, I think from what I've seen from this, you're right, kind of like the Unity style at that time, it was almost like combat was a bit like a dance, and it was very stylistic in terms of the style of sword fighting and things like that. I feel like Valhalla, because it is literally just, it's raids, it's rushing, it's trying to, put your enemy into the ground before they can put you in the ground. From what I've seen and what I've read, it's, quite brutal, quite visceral, really kind of like one-on-one in the dirt kind of combat, last man standing style, which is, I guess the picture that you have of large-scale kind of fights of the time period.
One thing I have been thinking of, and as I have expressed on this show in a previous episode, we are inclusive of all consoles. This isn't a one-sided console, but one big take for Valhalla is PS5. And the reason I'm bringing this up for Valhalla is the control of the PS5 is haptic, so you get that proper weighty tension from a bow. I wonder how that's going to play in with next gen, because we know Sony has alluded a lot of times that the haptic triggers are going to feel the difference between riding on dirt, the tension of a bow to the tension of a trigger. And we know a lot of combat in Assassin's Creed since Origins is now the two bumpers. So how can they make the combat feel more weighty and meaty using this new haptic expression on controllers?
I've seen a lot of things written about controllers for every generation of console.
Well,
it's very rare that I see a difference. It's not that I can't possibly comment, obviously, because the PS5's not out yet. No, not had hands on with the controller. I think it's going to be very different from a game to game basis. I don't know how much it's going to impact the game. That's not to say in a few years' time will the kind of haptic side of things in the controller play a bigger part. Of course they will. It was, it's such a generational thing. I mean, people will be take a couple of years just to get used to the console, what it's capable of, and what they can do. Just like looking back at like the Xbox 360, who would have thought that GTA 5 would be able to release on the Xbox 360?
that's true. It's kind of a strong-looking game.
To the very end of that console's life cycle, developers were still working out how far they could push it.
And I think, as I've seen a lot of people talk about the combat from Valhalla and from the demos, it has got me wondering a lot about the controller in more the sense of how's it going to feel going from, as we saw in the raid, the light, weighty tension of a bow to suddenly the heavy, meaty swordplay of the axe. And then is it going to be a different tension for the two shields, or is it just going to feel like one general sensation for all combat and then something different for bows? It's got me kind of wondering what can they do for next gen that's going to make this Valhalla game, which has a lot going for it, be more immersive than it actually is designed to be.
Yeah, my prediction for that is it's going to get a graphical upgrade and that'll be it.
Which makes sense. They did that with Black Flag.
I would be putting those resources into the next Assassin's Creed game. When it's had a full development cycle with the PlayStation 5, you'll have a bundle of data to use from the initial kind of release of the PlayStation 5. I just don't know how much sense it would make because I just feel like Ubisoft will, if they tried it and they did it for the PlayStation 5 version of Valhalla, they're going to ruin it somehow.
I can understand. So let's move away from random tech things that got me I'm kind of going crazy. And the one thing I really, really, really want to talk about, and I want to use this show to talk about it so more listeners can reach out, parkour's back.
Yeah, seems like it.
But there's a missing part, and I swear to anyone that if Darby and the team have not added it in for the setting, I, as a British person who lives near forests, will be upset. They've not mentioned tree parkour since AC3. The last time we saw it was Black Flag. But no one's talking about it for Valhalla when it needs to be in Valhalla.
I think it's, and this could be a prediction gone wrong, but I think it's safe to say that obviously when you get to segments where we're rolling through, some of England's vast, luscious forest land, I think it would be silly if you weren't able to parkour through the trees. I would be extremely, extremely surprised if you can't.
So would I. And I think my biggest disappointment, if the tree parkour's there, is in one of the combat trailers, they showed the Viking harpoon. And if we're thinking on the same wavelength here, rope dart,
yeah.
Viking harpoon, trees, please let me do mad stuff in the trees because I never talked about it in a deep dive in 3, but you got the proper Predator vibe in Assassin's Creed 3 where you can stalk the trees, throw a rope dart down, end game. It was phenomenal. And I want that in Valhalla. It's daft, but this game is going more Assassin's Creed than Origins, and it's what's needed. There's a better parkour system in certain areas because people are kind of forgetting that as history goes, the verticality changes, so you can't always have a fleshed out parkour system if there's not much vertical landscapes. But Valhalla's going to change that from what I've seen.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting because obviously there's these times, barring kind of I guess like cathedrals and forts and tower like old lookout towers and things like that, there wouldn't have been much verticality in terms of large buildings. So they're going to have to make do with what they've got in terms of that height. And I just think it would make sense in that respect then to have some kind of treetop parkour system.
So another one which is touched on, which we'll touch on more later with the comments, but I've heard a lot of mixed reviews on the new Hidden Blade system, where everything and anyone, including bosses, if you get the right skill, is insta-killed. Now, some love it, like me. Others hate it because doesn't it make boss fights too easy? But it's just got me wondering, where's the divide between wanting a one-shot Hidden Blade back, but not allowing to hit bosses for one-shots?
Yeah, I mean, look, Ubisoft aren't stupid. If there are certain bosses that they don't want us to kill with the Hidden Blade in one shot, and they want us to suffer and cry and scream through the boss fight, they will make that happen. My opinion, well, not my opinion, but I guess it is my opinion of what I think is going to happen is that there will be certain people where the opportunity is there for you to one shot them. There will be another number of people where they will not let that happen. Whether it's you just can't get to them to do it, or there's some kind of cutscene as you approach them. If there's a boss that Ubisoft want you to fight, they're going to make you fight them.
So then, if there's a boss where it's around the boss area, like in the trailers, all those like rooftops that you can abutment you climb on, a lot of them areas will be good for the one shot. But if there's an open plain, like you see one of the supernatural fights, that one you could expect it not to be sensible to have a one shot mechanic.
Yeah, definitely. But also, I wouldn't rule out like it's easy for the game to know when you're jumping off a roof to assassinate someone.
Yeah.
So then it's not inconceivable for Ubisoft to have something in the code that triggers a cutscene that switches to you about to fall on them with the Hidden Blade, only for the person to turn around and knock you to one side.
I would kind of laugh.
So that's what I'm saying.
I'd kind of laugh if that
I'm
happened.
glad the option's there, and I'm glad it will be possible for some. But I'm fairly confident that there will be a workaround from Ubisoft's side to stop us just doing that to every boss and finishing the game in an hour.
Imagine that, just one shot at everyone.
Yeah.
But as a YouTuber called Joe Raptor did explain in one of his videos, a lot of misinformation around this one-shot mechanic is it's not actually something you can get from straight away. He did say that in the skill tree, there's a passive that once you unlock it, I think it's called Master Assassin or something, it gives you that quick time event, which is like the weird red circle. And if you get that in the middle, that's essentially stimulating that Eivor spawn a weak spot for an insta-kill. But until you get to that skill point, you're not going to be able to insta-kill huge bosses using quick time events. So you're still going to have that length of gameplay where you can one-shot lower enemies, but bosses are just going to be RPG fights where you've got to kick their ass in the most magical moment you can think
Yeah,
of until you get them skills.
it's like, yeah, like there'll be certain like mini bosses that where you're perfectly fine to jump off a roof and stab them in the neck and kill them. But I think for the main story related bosses that are crucial to the story's development and pacing, I don't think you're going to be able to one shot those.
I can understand that. So the last thing I want to bring up, and then you can, because I think I've talked too much. I'm just too excited. Is a departure to the common RPG skill tree
Mm,
mechanics. I don't know if you've noticed this. There's a huge ass skill tree, but they're not Origins or Odyssey style where when you put points in them you get abilities. Apparently the abilities you get you find in the wild using Odin's
mm,
sight, but the skill tree itself is just passives. So you're not going to get I think it's Flight of the Valkyries, which is that flying knee kick, or a predator shot. I haven't really seen much of the abilities. From a skill tree, you have to find them in the wild. And I think it's kind of a better way than people grinding hard to fill up a skill tree just for certain perks.
yeah, because I think there's things called books of knowledge or something uh, throughout the world to um, make certain abilities or parts of the skill tree more powerful. But yeah, the skill tree looks quite good. It's split into three segments. I think Raven, Bear, and Wolf. Obviously, to obviously, I think the Raven is for stealth. The Wolf is bow skill, and the Bear's more on kind of weapon combat, kind of and melee. Um, just from what I've seen, it looks like each kind of arm of the skill tree has a real kind of basically a lot of kind of different active and passive skills. So much so that I doubt you'd be able to unlock them all on a single playthrough.
Hmm.
Which I think for me, that's a good thing because I think it makes each choice more important. If you know that you've got to sacrifice certain skills or abilities throughout, I think it becomes more of a weighty choice when you do need to put points into the tree.
So it can help you truly build your own wolf-kissed assassin Viking, Whereas, um, as long as you don't make the same mistake as Origins, where there's no respec. I know you don't
Mm,
need to respec in Origins, but there is none. But I just think as long as I like the idea, but as long as the respec option isn't as piss
yeah,
easy, pardon my French, as Odyssey, because it really annoys me that in Odyssey I can just spend 100 gold and just respec. I think I respec about 50 times in a day. And I just think that takes away what you've just said, that weighty choice of making your own perks and abilities stand
yeah,
out.
yeah. It's like there should be benefits, but there should also be drawbacks. Like a good RPG, there are benefits to doing it this way, but there are also some drawbacks. And it's all about having to weigh that decision up in your mind. Is it worth it? And yeah, I just think it makes these decisions a lot more important and certainly more RPG like.
So I've done enough talking. Sorry, I'm just overhyped for this game. What are the best things and worst things you've possibly seen from the trailers yourself?
Um, well, I mean, how can we talk about anything other than the Viking rap battles? um,
About that.
trading barbs back and forth like an old Viking grime MC. Um, and it's like I like it. It's different. It's probably a bit stupid, but that's probably why I like it. But then, as far as I can tell from my research, it was a big part of Viking culture. So it's more anything that might get me immersed is great. It might turn out to be rubbish, and I'll do it once and never do it again. But I think it's a cool thing to look at for now. But there also seems to be other kind of different mini games to kind of lean into the kind of, I guess, community side of Vikings. I think I saw stuff like precision archery, dice games, drinking games, stone stacking games. So I mean, I just think there's going to be a lot to do. But from what I've seen, it all seems like it's going to have its place in this world. In the past, I've had problems with them adding stuff to do just for the sake of it, and as such, I don't bother doing it because what's the point?
And I think the best thing to point out, which is exactly what you said, they've removed all secondary objectives from
Mm.
the game. They're not on the map, you just find them randomly. So if you're just chilling doing south and you bump into someone who's lost a cat,
Yeah,
you, that's a side quest you pick up. You're not going to be spammed. The map looks so, not to sound harsh, but it's a good thing, but the maps that look so bland and boring because it's not littered with tons and tons of logos that we're used to. It's just loaded with three color systems, one for wealth, power, and I forgot the third one. And that's just it. Just three color logos,
yeah,
nothing
and
else.
because I think for me, I think it started as much as I love it. I think it started with Black Flag, this kind of map anxiety that you just look at it and you just don't, I don't know where to begin with all this. So it's a good thing that they seem to be trying to tone that down a bit. See, it seems like from what you sort of said that the world itself is going to be smaller as well than the likes of Odyssey and Origins, which I don't think is a bad thing. I feel like in Odyssey in particular, I felt like there was a lot of empty space. But it also, with a smaller world, it means the world is naturally going to feel a lot more full, which
Yeah.
is I can only see that as a good thing, really.
See, it's kind of confusing because a few people I've talked to, it seems like this world map is still under discussion because from some sources I've heard, the map's apparently meant to be bigger than Origins and Odyssey, but because it's not got that 65% water that Odyssey has, it feels a lot smaller, even though the scope of the world is much bigger, which I don't know. I think it's one of the things that we're going to have to find out when we actually get the game, but it seems people are still debating whether or not the map's going to be bigger or smaller.
Yeah, I mean that it's going to be one of those things, isn't it? So it'd be interesting to see. Yeah, I just think it's going to look bigger because there's going to be a lot less dead space that where nothing happens, basically.
So, before we read some snazzy comments, we've got a few comments. I wanted to ask you a question because I like questions. From what I've noticed with Valhalla, do you like the approach that all the other Assassin's Creed games show you're in a memory? You know, you're playing the memory of an ancestor, except for what Layla did, but that's another story. But Valhalla has more mechanics and gameplay that shows you're not reliving a memory, but you're living a life. And do you feel like that's probably a better approach to Assassin's Creed to live a life than just replay a memory?
I think so. I think that's probably a better way to do it. I think Ubisoft are trying to stray away from the original idea of playing a memory.
And really, maybe that's not a bad thing,
I don't think it's a
because
bad thing necessarily.
I think, as I've expressed a couple of times, a memory a memory may be fluid from point A to point B, but with how the animus has grown in the lore, maybe it might be time that when we relive a memory, we don't just relive segments of the memory, but we relive the life of the memory as a whole. And that makes the game a bit more immersive because you're not blocked off by sequences. You just relive in the whole. So maybe it's a year-long memory you live in, because people's memories aren't always just day to day. Some memories last for lifetimes.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of a new tactic they should approach.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's been a lot. I think there's probably been guilty of kind of getting bogged down in things and feeling like they have to commit to a certain way of doing things. When the reality is, you can kind of, I guess the law in the world is what you make it. You can change it. They could turn around. It would piss everyone off, but they could turn around the next game and say and start off with, and it was all a dream. They have the creative license to do that should they so wish. They won't, because it would piss everyone off. But that's what I'm saying. So they can kind of rewrite it and rework it how they want, and I think we're seeing that start.
So a better way to, because Darby did say at the start that this is the end, but not the end, where like they tie in all the arcs from 1 to Valhalla, and they tie everything up and everything works nicely. So maybe this is the end of Assassin's Creed, but next game is a reboot where they try a new idea where it's more you live the life of an assassin, the law's a bit stronger, and there's more emphasis on living a life than being bogged down with tons of quests, tons of world activities you may never do. Instead, you just relive the actual life of an assassin.
Yeah, I think so.
Right, so some comments. I like comments. Thanks to everyone that submitted these comments. The first 2 comments I got, I'm going to put together because they have the same vibe. T-Mac and Bones, if I pronounce your name right, guys, from the first Civ Discord group. I'm sorry, my brain's not working. I'm probably going to get killed for that. So they both do suggest that animations need work and more polish, and the character models look murky. Bones, sorry, buddy. Built on that, saying that parts had textures popping, animations didn't connect properly, and there was bugs of shields flying. The map looks decently big, and it's big enough, in his opinion. Parkour looked both heavy and smooth at the same time, and world exploration looked very interesting, but I'm afraid it become repetitive after a while. And I think he's hit on some I think they both hit some valid points. That at the moment, it does look meh.
Yeah.
It needs that time to fix.
Yeah, we'll touch on that first. I don't think it looks great from what we've seen so far. It doesn't look like an end of generation game, when by now we should know the kind of upper limits of the console. That being said, I believe they would have been relatively, I wouldn't say early, but early-ish builds that people have got to play and got some hands-on time with. So they will naturally have certain kinks in them, such as kind of texture pop-ins and frame rate issues and things like that. But that's just an assumption. But knowing Ubisoft, I'm not sure. So I guess the benefit is, there's still kind of 4 months. We're still best part of 4 months away.
Yeah.
So there's time. There is time, but it doesn't. If that it was the current state, that's not good for 2 years development.
Imagine if that is. Imagine if that's what they ship it, and we have like flying. We have a Unity debacle again.
Yeah, we don't need another one of those.
So let's move over to Twitter.
What was the second one about world exploration?
Thank you for pointing that out. My notes are just running away from me. Don't you love it when your notes don't want to be in the show? World exploration looks very interesting, but I'm afraid they become repetitive after a while.
Yes. It's a difficult
Okay,
one
yes.
because it all depends on what you're into. I think generally you get kind of bored of world exploration, regardless. It's hard to have every area of the world, super fantastic to look at and an amazing discovery. That being said, Ubisoft always do tend to do quite well in terms of making stuff look good, making stuff feel good. So yeah, it will probably become tedious. Like most other games, it will probably get a bit tedious towards the end, exploring the world and finding the new areas. But I still think it'll be good.
I don't think it's going to be tedious because, unlike games of old, when you go to let's say, a wealth marker, which is gold, you're not going to know what is there. You're going to know that it's going to be a wealth system that you need to raid a monastery or raid something, but you don't know what's there. So to know what that job is or what activity is, you have to explore it. And I think that adds less repetitiveness because it's not you know, you don't see the icon immediately. No, okay, this is a fetch quest. This is a kill X amount of enemies quest. You're like, okay, I don't know what's there, so I'm gonna go there and find out. And then when you get there, you're like, oh, I like this mechanic. Let's do this. Or you taking your horse for a stroll and some kid runs in front of you and you stop to talk to him, and suddenly you're now on this mini story trying to help him fix a roof or find his dad that's gone missing. That's why I don't think it's going to be repetitive because these icons aren't in your face. You don't know when you're going to find them.
No, I don't think it'll be repetitive. I think it'll be tedious.
I don't know the difference.
I just think, I guess the only point of reference I would have would be, I guess, recently Odyssey Origins, right? I'm a bit of a freak for having question marks on my map. I don't like having them there. How am I supposed to know what that is and whether I need to do it or not? I have to go and find out what that is. So if I travel all that way and it's a bandit camp, guess what I'm doing? I'm turning right around and going away.
Run.
But it's fine. Like I said, in the early stages of the game, you think, oh wow, bandit camp. I'm going to clear it out and see if I can find anything good, or if there's any kind of story hints in here, or more lore pieces. Great. After about 30 of those, it's like, yes, I know, boys, you want to kill me. You've seen me. You want to kill me. I'm literally just here to get the question mark off my map. I'll see you later. If they can find a way around that, that's great. I don't think there's a way that they can make every undiscoverable thing really interesting.
Well, my biggest question to them is, and if you listen to this and you have played the demo or Ubisoft, tweet us at AC Let's Talk. But my biggest question is both games, Origins and Odyssey, had clear map of trophies. You had to do the entire world map. 3 weeks it took me to complete the entire Origins map. Kid not. Every question mark, done. Every done. At Odyssey, don't bother.
Yeah.
But if Valhalla won't have their mechanics, how can we clear the whole map if we're just going to gold, going to blue, and going to silver if we don't know what's there? And if we don't know what side quests are going to appear, please tell me we will not have a complete the world trophy. I will cry. I want to plan.
I'm sure the trophy list will leak soon enough.
Just don't have a clear map. So we are running out of time, so we'll quickly fly for these last two because it's nearly 35 minutes. We must love Valhalla. So I'll read both of them out and then we'll discuss both at the same time. Sounds good in my head, but it might not work.
Let's go for it.
So the first tweet is off AC Landmarks. He really likes us.
He does. He's going to get T-shirts with our faces on.
If he does, I will buy him a medal. I love speaking.
But we love him, so we'll get a T-shirt with his face on it as well.
That's a good idea. I might ask him about this. I digress. For me, I really like Assassin's Creed Valhalla. It has been in diverse locations in the world. They feel different, especially in Eivor's Fate trailer. Something to work on. I feel that female Ava needs her own CGI trailer. We saw a bit of it, but come on, we need all of it. The second tweet was off Synth Potato, which is just a really cool name. I love instant assassinations are back, and I really hope we see more ways of social stealth being used. From what we've seen, it looks incredibly interesting. As for something that needs to work, just polish the game, fix the cape physics and faces, etc. So we've already touched on stuff that needs fixed.
Female
I really
Eivor
agree.
trailer. Yes, they should do one. I agree.
Yes,
Next.
that was my current point. We need the ML
Yes.
trailer because I'm not being rude. If Darby's going to tweet me back and say yes, both women, give me a really strong female trailer and give me a really strong male trailer, and for the love of God, do not send me a case of Assassin's Creed Valhalla that I have to open, take the piece of paper out, and then flip it around just to have the female side.
Have them both side by
Do
side
not
on the
do that.
front.
Yeah, because they did that with Odyssey. I opened it up. I noticed it, and I thought that's a bit disrespectful. Cassandra should have been right next to Alexios. But that's a different topic for another night.
What was the other one? About social stealth and one-hit assassinations. Yeah, we've talked about the kind of one-hit assassinations quite a bit, but generally we like that they're back. They'll find a way to make sure they don't work for bosses. And social stealth, yeah, I think if any way Assassin's Creed has stopped being a stealth game, any way that they can bring elements of that back, it's great.
And a quick one on the social stealth. Joe Raptor pointed this out again, so shout out to him. In one of the trailers, you look like you could blend in with people, which looked cool. It looked like, you could stop to pay a beggar. So I wonder how that would fit in. Maybe you switch places with the beggar.
As long as they don't run up to you in the streets like they did in the Ezio collection. Please don't ever do that. Again, please no.
And the other one that I saw in the trailer was, it looks like you were playing with dough or something, as if you were making something. So when you go to a big city that you're not welcome, there's interactable locations. So no longer are we this white-caped dude sat on a bench and everyone's like, oh my God, where's he gone? Because we're now actually with the people. We're baking. We're sitting on a bench talking to them. We're paying a beggar, or we're part of the crowd. That feels realistic.
Yes, I agree. Social stealth is great. It's a shame that it basically disappeared properly after Assassin's Creed 1. And social stealth makes sense and is sensible, and they should do more of it.
And the very, very, very last point I'll make on social stealth. If I'm not allowed to assassinate random people while in social stealth, I will not be impressed, because I love being a ninja. On just paying a beggar, guy comes around, oh look, he's helping a beggar, stab in the face.
Bang, do it. Let us do it, Ubisoft.
You know, sitting at a board playing chess. Oh, you playing chess? Bam, you're dead. I'll take your cash now. So we're reaching 40 minutes. This is the longest episode we've ever made. I
feel like this was going to be a long one, to be fair.
We love Valhalla. It's Assassin's Creed Origins meets Assassin's Creed of old. They should have done this with Odyssey, but I love Odyssey still for some different reasons, which we are discussing next week. My brain has fried. See, too much Valhalla news. So if you guys really enjoyed this, please keep tweeting us stuff you know about Valhalla. Come to our Discord server. There's a link in the pinned comment on Twitter. And one thing I really want to see to put on our Instagram, fan art.
Definitely.
I really want to see Eivor fan art. So cool. So that's all we've got time for tonight. I thank you all for coming.
Thank you very much, guys.